2019. I hope everybody had a wonderful break, which no doubt seems like weeks and weeks and months ago now, as it is. Just a reminder that we are being live streamed, but welcome everybody. I think I have apologies for lateness from Her Worship the Mayor. Otherwise, I think we have a full house, and welcome those councillors to the table who aren't members of this committee. Confirmation of order of business, there is no change to that, so we'll proceed as per the agenda. Interests, are there any updates to the interest register or any conflicts that need to be identified specific to matters on this agenda? Thank you.
Could you just move the apology, please?
Thank you. I've just been reminded I will move the apologies. Would somebody please, thank you, Councillor Barker. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. We have no interest conflict, so we'll move on from there. No public forum has been notified, so we'll move to confirmation of the minutes of the 13th of November 2018. Page 7 of the agenda. Are there any changes to those minutes? Mr. Murray?
Thank you, Through the Chair. I didn't know if this is the right time to raise this in the meeting, but the minutes appear to be incorrect in that at the beginning they note the Mayor as being on leave of absence, but at items 10 and items 11 somehow magically we're moving and seconding them from the deputy, from the Mayor. So I'm not sure if she's here or not, but I don't know how we move and second meeting minutes if, or resolutions if we're at leave of absence.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. My recollection was that the Mayor was in fact here. I think I recall at the start of the meeting saying, "Welcome, Madam Mayor. I noted you were shown as a leave of absence, but you're very welcome," or words to that effect. So I think she was actually here. So could the minutes be changed to reflect those? Are there any other changes? Thank you for those, Mr. Murray. Could I have a mover that with those amendments the minutes be confirmed? Thank you, Councillor Barker. Thank you, Mr. Murray. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Chairperson's report. I have a brief report there. I thought worth acknowledging the continuation, the reaffirmation of our AA rating. I think this is an easily overlooked but really important measure of something around the key financial parameters and how the organisation, the council team under the Chief Executive handles these. So I just wanted to commend that. Also comment on the fact that we're continually working on the reporting formats, and we will see those refinements happening. A reminder please for anybody to continue to give us comments. One of the things I think of particular note this time around is that the focus on LTP achievement and the risks to the LTP achievement is something that I think is going to be really useful moving forward, and keeping the risks to the LTP at the forefront. But I do think it is important that we don't lose the focus on those risks that we've already identified. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that when we get to the risk section itself. I think there's a couple of points that we just need to guard against there. So before I see if there's any questions or comments on that, I'll move my chair's report be received. Thank you, Councillor Dahlberg. Is there any discussion on that? All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Move now to the quarterly report, and hand to Ms Harrison. Oh, sorry, to Tracy. To Ms Hughes. Sorry, I didn't see you walk in, Tracy. So normal situation, any updates, any highlights before we open it up for questions?
Good afternoon, everyone. Through the Chair, yes, further to what the chairman just said. The quarterly report has been changed slightly again in response to comments both from the last time this report was presented to this meeting and also to other committee meetings as well. Excuse me. Most markedly, perhaps in terms of looking at capital projects, you will see from your pages 26 onwards, what we're trying to do here is to give you an overview of how the projects are looking at the moment, or our latest advice, and this is the same information that will be going to the other committees, except because the timing for each of the committees is slightly different. What we have in this report is what we knew at that time. There may have been some updates when they go to the other committees, and I believe the Chief Executive may wish to correct me. I believe what has been tabled are updates to what is in my report.
Well, what they reflect is the fact that we're somewhat stretched at the moment in terms of one of my GMs is still on leave, hasn't come back from his Christmas holidays yet, and another one has been heavily involved with the civil defence response out at Richmond. So our vetting processes for some of these reports wasn't what it should be. So these are two updated versions that are being distributed today. My apologies.
Through the chair, another improvement, I guess, on page 20. Again, in response to comments from committees, you'll see where we've noted things are greater than or less than budget. We have colour-coded those to make it easier for people to recognise whether it's a positive or negative impact. Excuse me. I think the only other thing I had to say. Oh yes, and it's not actually apparent in this particular report, but we will do it for the upcoming reports. Is that you'll know from having read this that we have some grossing up that may have happened or may not have happened, and it does confuse where we have very large variances in both income and expenditure. We're going to look at recasting those budgets so that those variances don't occur in that same way. It just causes noise, I think.
Thank you. Any questions of Ms. Hughes? I think probably with a report like this it's worth going through the different sections. So, I mean, starting with the dashboard page, page 19. Obviously the one that sort of stands out as the outlier there is the capital revenue is small, and the capital expenditure is an area that we've focused on over a number of times, and we all know how tricky and difficult this is, but it is just a point to note that, you know, we once again see a slightly concerning drift from that, and while appreciating that your point, Mr. Doherty, about challenges and shortages of staff and those, we see the manifestation of it here, and I must admit I also saw manifestation this morning when a report that we thought at one stage might have been available for discussion before Christmas wasn't available for the meeting this morning, so it's just a sort of ongoing concern around some of those large capital projects around the city. So that was my observation on that. We don't know as much we can add to the previous discussions around it, but feel free to do so. Any other points on the key indicators? If not, we'll move to the income and expenditure by committee.
I'm not sure at what stage you want to talk about the commentary side of the report or the discussion. There's a couple of variances under 4.2 that I'd like to ask some questions about, if I may, and also a wee bit further on into section 6. So I'm not sure where you'd like those.
Happy to take those now, Mr.
Okay. So first of all, just a comment. 4.2 second dot point, you'll see that the forestry harvesting is ahead of its forecast as well as its expenditure 1.1. There is a surplus still being created in the forestry harvesting activity in the closed account. So a lot of, or 35 to 40% of that overrun is dealing with the specific issue we have up at the Tantra G block and doing some investigative work around that. I was intrigued to see that the water meter income is $500,000 ahead of budget. And it says higher related water meter readings, and I found that a wee bit unusual, given that water usage is generally pretty consistent, I would have thought. And just was looking for a wee bit of explanation around, is that just more water usage, or is that something else sitting in underneath it? And the public transport from the takings being gross versus net, I appreciate we're in a process of doing that transfer, but I suppose the question is are we still on track with what we were thinking around that in terms of the economics of it, and are we still heading on budget for what we thought should have been the budget?
Thank you.
Through the chair. As regards public transport, and I don't know whether Ms Parfitt wants to pad this out at all, but there is what looks like an overrun in expenditure there. I suspect that may have something to do with timing in terms of when we build NZTA and what is available for us to build at that time. As regards the process, I'm not sure if Marg wants to jump in there.
So if I may, just to clarify, again, reiterate that we're moving to a gross contract at the same time that we move to electronic ticketing, which has been delayed. So when we set the LTP figures, we thought we'd be in that stage now. We're not there yet. September or October of 2019 is when that will happen. We have renegotiated the existing contract on a net basis in the interim.
Through the chair, and your other query in regards to water meter income, yes, it does look somewhat surprising, and it is a very large number. We did have quite a close look at this and look at the readings. There is an element of accrual in there, but the accrual process that we have for water is fairly well bedded in and fairly well audited. So I'm fairly confident that that is where we are at the moment.
Just more usage.
Just more usage.
Thank you. Did you have something under item 6, Mr. Murray? I thought you mentioned one other item.
Yes, so further question under, 4.4.4, I'm sure we'll cover this when we get there, but there's a comment that we're 4.5 million behind budget on our capex, and I just wondered, it does say we'll get a better feel for that as the year moves through, but is that an early indication that we probably won't hit our capital forecast expenditure at this point?
No, we discussed this at one of the annual plan workshops. The latest projections I've seen indicate that we're heading towards around about $34 million out of the $42 million target.
Okay, thank you.
Which is I think it was 28 million last year, so it's better, but we're still not there. But we also, and I know it's no excuse, but we still haven't filled all the vacancies in our infrastructure and project teams.
Okay, so appreciate we've got some challenges through there. So a new number in our heads, 34 million, is that?
Can I just clarify because we have lots of numbers jumping around whether or not they include staff time or not. So on 4.4.4, it's 37.6 versus 42.
Right, so we'll land at 37.6, not 34. I'm just trying to get a feel for where we'll head towards the end of the year. That's all.
So my understanding at this point in time, with updated projections, we're aiming for 37.6, and that includes staff time.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Look, I just 6.3. There's a comment here. There's a paragraph on the Downer contract. in the middle of all of this. Look, the question I had here was this process that's gone through. I just was seeking some assurance that, one, this has happened within policy and within delegations, because I'm not too sure where this decision gets to in terms of a governance issue, but I'm sure there'd be policies and delegations for management to act on this sort of thing. And so really it was just really, have we followed our own processes and procedures to where we need to be with this?
In terms of our, so the background to this is, down as we're just over 1 year into this contract, when they came and asked could they renegotiate the prices because they were making significant losses. And in our view, that's completely against our purchasing policy. They've been through a competitive tendering process that they don't get to then renegotiate the prices up. So the compromise that was reached was rather that if we made them stay for the full 3 years, we were just going to end up in an endless arm wrestle with them. There would be a lower level of service, higher ratepayer dissatisfaction, and I'd probably need an extra staff member to supervise and argue with them, which is in no one's best interests. So the compromise that was reached was they saw out 2 years, and they're doing that and doing that in good faith. So we think that's the best we can do. In terms of delegations, I've looked at the delegations, and it looks like management of contracts sits with me and with staff. Yes.
Anything further on that, Mr. Murray?
Well, I think, thank you for that. I suppose it's important from my point of view that the process in terms of our policies and delegations have been followed around this matter, and if it does indeed sit with the Chief Executive, which wouldn't surprise me, then that is indeed how it's rolled out. But so without having the policies and delegations, I was just seeking that assurance that we have followed our own policies and procedures on this matter, that's all.
Thank you. I had taken the opportunity to discuss this with the Chief Executive previously and had received that assurance as well, so it's good to have that there. Councillor Walker.
So I just wanted to add one thing. So in retrospect, if we were doing it again, there would be more discussions with the Chair and Deputy Chair of the Infrastructure Committee, and I've acknowledged that.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Councillor Walker.
Yeah. Thank you. I would like it recorded my complete concern that this has occurred. I just find it really strange that a contract is not a contract. And I had no prior warning that there was an issue here. And I would like to think that if things were going wrong, that some discussions would have occurred at an earlier stage rather than be advised, oh, for your information we have done this. And so I would like it recorded that I am concerned about that, and I would like some assurance that we get out of it the best way we can. In other words, the exposures of the ratepayers to this situation really concerns me.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Just noting the Chief Executive's final comment, acknowledging that this should have been informed earlier, and I think that message is received, and as is your concern about it. So, thank you. Councillor Skinner, did you want to comment?
Yeah, just at least one.
Perhaps I'll answer that no, through the Chair. So longer term, I don't think we've got really enough data to work out whether or not we've got longer term growth in our water needs. I wouldn't have thought we would, and that was just one set of meter readings. So the other, but obviously we do have more houses coming on board, and there has been discussion around taking over some of that Nelson South water metering into our area, so, you know, that will have an impact.
Yes, I'm probably going to answer that in regards to using less now.
And where I was getting onto is with our residential water meter reads sort of coming up over the April-ish period, they're over, I would suspect that those readings will be lower again and will bring us back into line for the year. So I'm certainly not counting that that's a long-term impact for the year. It is a closed account, so if we do go over or under within that year, it is closed within that activity. So if we go over, it just gets used to repay debt.
Thank you. And the other one.
Through the Chair, there is actually two impacts going on there. One is the net versus gross element of it relating to the trust and the timing of moving to the trust, and the other is a different timing issue around when we had assumed that expenditure would happen. So I'm pretty confident that for the Arts Festival that it will actually tie up for the year.
And thank you for letting me speak on a question on this. And when I look on page 20, and obviously the sport and recreation special interest there, and we're ahead on budget by 120k, and the commentary is due to unbudgeted revenue from Bay Dreams rental. Now, I guess there's still a bit of wash up to do to work out where we're at. How much did Bay Dreams put into our coffers? Or is that too early to ask?
So through the Chair, are you talking in terms of gross fee or what it's? I mean, because the reality is there is a report coming back to the Sports and Rec Committee doing a bit of a wash up of what it's actually cost us to run the event.
So I think
it's still not really clear on the.
Well, that might be the case. And I see it's a 120k, but that could be a combination of all sorts of good things happening, not just.
Can I suggest through the Chair that information is commercially sensitive, and perhaps you might like to go back to Councillor Skinner outside of the meeting, because there is an element of commercial sensitivity around that particular number.
I can understand that, but it's not confidential in the sense that if we're getting income from our facilities, that's not confidential itself. We don't have to be in detail on what we've on the business's interactions with that, but there is a transparency which I expect, and I'm not denying there isn't. There's still a bit of wash up and things to add up and take into account from the greater picture. But I'll just raise that. But I saw that figure 120. But I'm sure that's a combination of things. And quickly then, just sorry on the Downer contract, just so there's no misunderstanding, I'm completely in support with the Chair, Mr Stuart Walker, on that. I was concerned, and I thank you for the commentary there, because I raised it at our works infrastructure and was expecting a commentary here, and I thank you to the Chief Executive to raise how that is. But also, just a reminder, end of the day, the ratepayer got spanked on that one there with them pulling out, and that's once again for the engineers, not the engineers, the contractors put in their bid, and often we get caught out where projects take longer or great expense, and we have to fork out of our pockets to pay that, and then it's gone the other way, we get spanked as well. So some of these things you've got to balance up. But the question would be is how much is that costing us resources and difficulties to get a new contract? They're seeing out there 2 years. Is there cost to us on that? Is that something that can be quantified?
Through the Chair, quantified, certainly there is staff time involved in procuring any contract and evaluating it. I can't put an exact number on it.
Thank you for that. That will probably come up later, but just to reiterate, that would have been, and hopefully in the future there's a bit more input from us as governance on some of that strategies there, and what to happen to contractors which fail to provide what they're going to provide at the cost, and a bit of input from us as well on how we move on and don't allow that to happen again. And that makes me nervous now for future contracts. I hope that's just a one-off, but I know these things aren't always black and white. But I do thank you for the explanation on that, but it is a real spanking the ratepayers got, which I would have thought we should be taking the winnings from there, not the losings, both ways.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. I think one of the key things in this, as far as answer the question asked by Mr. Murray, these are within management delegations, and I think that's an important factor to bear in mind.
And again, I feel for the chair because...
Understood, thank you. Councillor Rutledge.
Thank you. Just a couple of queries from me. It says on page 25, the Neil Park pump station upgrade is significantly behind budget, which seems to contradict some site visits that we've done, but also commentary in the Works and Infrastructure meeting, where we're page 56 of the previous Works and Infrastructure meeting, which I appreciate you can't jump to, but said that 4 new pumps have been installed, ready for commissioning in January 19. Station will be fully functional from that date. Tidy up of the site expected to be completed mid-March. So I'm just wanting to understand how, that report was only with us on Tuesday last week, I think. Tuesday this week. Jeez, yeah, time flies. And they seem to be quite different commentary. Anybody help me out there?
Through the chair, this is a purely from a purely financial basis. So if the commissioning, if the major work and commissioning was happening in January or later, it wouldn't be captured in these figures because this is only up to December. My suggestion is we might not see those flow through until perhaps February.
Yes. The title of the line in the Works and Infrastructure report is Key Developments for the 3 months to 31 December 18. So it does seem we're talking about the same period. So one's saying it's going great, the other one's saying massively behind, and I just...
So through the chair, can I help on that? I think the issue is that the Neil Park pump station project was phased to be completed earlier in the year, and so Tracy's the quarterly report that you've got in front of you today is purely actual against phased budget, and it was originally intended that it would be completed. The commentary that's in the Works and Infrastructure is basically saying, yep, it's all going to be on, but my recollection of that project is it was intended to be completed earlier, sort of very much front-end loaded as opposed to how it's actually panned out. So I don't think they're contradictory, I think they're just talking about different things.
Okay, and then so the exact same logic would probably apply to the LED streetlight conversion then? It'd be the same sort of logic there. Because again, that was something that we got the update going at Works Infrastructure. Everything's looking really good. We've got 150 light towers to go. Good project, lots of big savings in there, which was fabulous. And then in here, it's listed as one of the big.
Again, yeah, I think that project was supposed to be done, completed earlier.
So, and so final on that, so when there's with that LED project, there's a really significant saving as part of that project. How does that get shown in this on budget, under budget? Because obviously we're not going to then try and deliver that $700,000 saving. That should come off the total budget that we're expecting to deliver, would it?
So through the chair, it actually gets captured in the forecast budget. So when we talk about what we are forecasting to deliver at the end of the year, the 37.6, for example, we will have taken those savings into account and reduced the budget. But what we're comparing it to is the original annual plan budget.
Sure, so I guess what I'm just trying to get my head around there, that $700,000 saving is a great news story. It's a job well done. I don't want to have it ended up looking like council's missed its capital budget by 700 grand, because actually it's done good work. That would, I don't think that serves anybody.
Thank you, Councillor Rutledge. I think the point's noted. Councillor Noonan, you had your hand up.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I think the interest in the quarterly reports is increased by the number of chairs sitting in the room, and I think you've got a full complement today. And I think the reason is that these reports are of a lot more interest because we can actually understand them a lot better. But we're also probably going to test them a little bit too. And so I do have a question in the area of community services, and it is off the back of the Bay Dreams. And in my report, which will come up next week, it talks about quite a lot of the work hasn't been able to be completed because staff were required, and that's absolutely understandable. And also with the current Tasman situation, you put them where they have to go at the right time. But the interesting thing is I would like to know how that financially reflects on that committee, in particular when we get an income maybe from the lease of the lands and things like that, but the staff costs come out of community services, which is reflected in the graph on page 20. Well, actually it's not in there yet, it will be in the next one, but I've actually got for my committee. But I think the example is one that would be, and I'm interested in, because if it affects the bottom line of the committee, I want to know how it's out of our control. So how does that work? I'd like to understand how that works.
Who's going to step up to that one?
So through the chair, I presume you're talking about Bay Dreams and the fact that it falls within Sports and Rec Committee.
Yes, the income goes into the Sport and Rec because it's so for example, we'll just slightly explore this if you don't mind. The grounds are Sport and Rec, so you charge a fee for the use of the ground. I guess some resource consent income will come as well, but the cost goes against the operating costs of a different committee. So it's sort of, it's because you can't control that, and I just wonder what mechanism, or is it just an explanation of why maybe community services, it's not in this one but it will be, the operating costs of the staff is used in a different area. So is it just a commentary? Because I haven't got any control over that, and I feel very responsible for the funds that come in and out of that committee, just as each chair around the table would. So really just want to understand how that works.
So the staff will actually charge their time to the should be charging their time to the actual activity. So if they are working on a Bay Dreams festival and it's within the sports park activity, then it would actually fall within that area. But it would have been budgeted as if they were spending all the time in your area, so you will be under budget on staff costs. Because the actuals will be lower than the budget.
So how does it look on the figures then? So the income comes into one area, goes out of the other, but it balances off between the two? No, I'm not understanding. You might have to try an easier way.
Through the chair, when it comes to quite discrete, if you like, pieces of work or programs such as this, I'm not sure that it's best to look at it in the different committees, you know, as being part of each different committee. I think with the report that's going to be coming, which will wrap up all of that, I hope, I think that's where you need to go for that kind of thing, and I think any variances that are related to that will just be picked up as we go through the normal quarterly reporting.
Just feeding back then, it's probably going to be an explanation in words, saying this is what it was spent on. Because I guess I'm feeling responsible for a budget, which I can't control. So that's really the dilemma. So I just wondered about the mechanism. So I think I'm understanding that if there's an up or a down in one particular area, there'll be a written commentary to explain. Would I be right? I mean, I'm never going to get the money back, so it's just an explanation of why something looks a certain way.
Are you confirming?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Noonan, and your comment about the sort of value, I think, of having the chairs and the other committee chairs in the room is good. I mean, the discussion does arise from this. It does give a chance to raise some of the concerns that are there. We might not be able to answer them all now, but at least we can have them sort of aired and a plan in place and a process to go through in that context. And hopefully it does mean that this, combined with the quarterly reporting, which I'm always interested in getting the feedback from committee chairs themselves and the new quarterly reporting, whether it is something that is assisting and helping those committees to better understand and move things forward. It is an impost on the staff. If it's not working, let's relieve them of that and see if we can find something else to do. But if it's working, then that's great. Welcome, Rachel. Councillor Barker, you had your hand up.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a follow-up question about the water meter income. I'm aware that we have accepted a purchase of the replacement meters, and I'm aware that there was a significant saving. The question is, anecdotally, we know that the existing meters are well past their use-by date. The new meters are going to be also mechanical. Is it likely that the new meters will show another increase in use of water because the old meters have been running slow? What's the anecdotal knowledge on what happens to meters over time, particularly those that are well over use-by date? Do they run slow or do they run fast?
Old meters tend to run slow. They tend to, if they have a problem, they tend to slip and underread, is my recollection. If no one else is trying to answer this question, are they? No. Yes.
So the implication is that we'll be faced with another increase in revenue, which of course will have to be taken out of the pockets of the water users because of the fact that they will probably record that they're using more than they've recorded in the past when they've used the same amount of water.
Yes, but it is a closed account, so there would be an adjustment in the price. And the other thing is it may reduce the amount of unaccounted for water as well.
I would hope that would be something we would enjoy.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Mr. Doherty, you wanted to make a comment in the previous discussion?
Yes, I've finally found the Works Committee agenda in terms of Councillor Rutledge's question. And yes, and I think that there's two things. One is the timing of the expenditure, but in this report we talk about behind, the expenditure is behind, whereas in the Works and Infrastructure we talk about it's coming in under budget. And I think there is a little bit of our terminology that we need to be more consistent across the committees, and we're still working on this. This is only a second go at it, and we are improving, but we do need to be more focused on that language. And I remember when the Works Committee reports came through, I got the word from behind changed to under to acknowledge that it was good news, but Audit, Risk and Finance already gone through.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty, that's useful. Okay, we'll carry on going through the report. We were at the operating income and expenditure by committee and by category. So I'm just flicking through. I know we've jumped ahead a little bit, but looking at the Treasury measures on page 22, satisfyingly green. Anything on the balance sheet, page 23? Total debt, page 24.
Yeah, through the chair. Just again, we've got our 3-month overdue debtors listed there and what's happening. We went into committee and the public excluded to discuss those more fully at the last meeting. I was just really wanting to ask a question as to if there's any update that's relevant that we need to go into public excluded to talk about in the context of these, or not at the moment.
We do have a public excluded session scheduled for today. We could take any detailed questions relating to the sensitive parts of this, the commercially sensitive parts of this at that time if you prefer.
Okay, so by the level of the committee, I'd ask that we just run through these in public excluded, just for an update. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee's okay with us doing that? Thank you. Right, we move capital expenditure, page 25. Anything that we haven't already discussed? And then we go to the major projects, the project health summary. Again, we've covered off a number of these, and noting the replacement of the pages for Elmer Turner Library and Green Meadows. Are there any other specific questions relating to the projects? I'm flicking through them reasonably quickly. If there isn't, that would bring us to the end of the quarterly report. There's no further questions of Ms. Hughes, Ms. Harrison. Would somebody please move that that report be received? Thank you, Councillor Dahlberg. Councillor Barker. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We move to quarterly risks and welcome Ms. Ackluck to the table. Hello, Arlene. Arlene, any updates, sort of comments, changes to the report since it's done, or any highlights you want to make before we open it up for questions?
Just to note an addition that's new to the report this quarter. It's noted in background section at 3.1 on page 39 of your agenda, to note that we've decided to include the 4 top priorities in the long-term plan that council has included to start signalling what we see the risks might be to achieving those priorities. So those are still under development, and I've discussed that in the report where we haven't fully completed risk assessment at this point, but it's new to the report.
Thank you. So any questions on the report itself before we move into the graphs or the tables? Councillor.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I got a comment staff on that. I quite like the idea of the risk achieved to the long-term 10 top priorities. It makes that look simple and actually means we're focusing on what we set out to drive last year. So well done on those changes.
Thank you, Councillor Dahlberg. I think the report does get better all the time. One comment I have is that I am a little concerned to see the removal from that top table of reputational risk. I think it's I think it's slightly any public service facing organisation such as this. I think the reputation risk is a significant one, and it was one that we discussed at some length at the time we established them. And while I understand some of the logic that's gone around there and some of those changes, I just wonder whether keeping focus at the top table, as it were, on as well as these other ones that are very good to see, and I endorse Councillor Dahlberg's comments. I just wonder if removal of reputational risk is an appropriate thing to do from this table. Comments on that, please, and if we'd like that put back, somebody. Anybody from the committee who'd like to comment on that?
Mr. Chair, I would agree with you. I think it is something that can have very detrimental effect on the image of this council, and I think it is something that should be kept. I noticed in risk area 11, it's there in terms of reputational loss that may occur because of inadequate consideration of the law and decision making, but I think it should be wider than that.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Madam Mayor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I'm just, I suppose, wanting to understand from the officers why it has been removed, and I'm wondering if it's represented in some other way, just in terms of, because I did see it as a consistent theme from at a governance level. I've been out of the chamber for a little while. I'm quite curious to see how we went while I was away in terms of reputation, but I'll find out, no doubt, shortly.
Through the chair. So on review of the organisational level risks, so risks that could significantly impact our ability to deliver core services to the public, that would be significant. On review of the 10 that were previously included, officers felt that because the risk was rated as low in those 3 areas, that we wouldn't report on them. However, reputational risk is considered under the other risks that appear in the report. So when those events take place, whether that will have a reputational impact or not has been assessed. So to clarify, I think what you're telling me is that you would like to see that continue to be included in its own right, even if the rating is low, and that would be in line with the request that we had previously from the chairperson to include the risk number 7, risk number 8 in relation to IT. That remains on the reporting to this committee, even though it's currently rated low. I'd just like to confirm if that's correct.
I think that's what we're hearing, Ms. Ackler. And I mean, I would just make the comment that having something on the risk register that is low is quite acceptable to me, because what you're doing is you're talking about what are the key risks. Low indicates that it's being well managed, which is a positive. In that sense, it doesn't mean it is no longer a risk. And I think that's the sort of subtle difference for me, in that a risk pertains even if it's being well managed, and I think that's what we're seeking here. Well managed, yes, but let's keep them live because they are important and they are risks. Councillor Rutledge.
Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chair. I'm quite conscious of the LGNZ numbers that we have around people's perceptions of local body councils and things like that, and so and how poor that is, and I'm having a hard time reconciling that with the idea that reputational risk is something that is considered a low risk. Perhaps it's a low risk of getting even worse, but surely our ambition should be higher than that. So I would be interested to understand why it's been considered a low risk, and also as we are today, and why that's considered also a low impact on the way the organisation performs all of its duties.
Thank you, Councillor. Ms. Ackler, do you want to respond to that?
Through the chair, I haven't been voted in yet. So in response to the query from Councillor Rutledge, in terms of provision of council services, reputational risk that may be assessed, for example, as negative comments in social media, we would see that as reputational risk. In terms of provision of core council services, such as being able to provide clean water, good transport routes, public transport, it doesn't impact on our ability to do that. If there was a very, very extreme reputational risk, for example, 15,000 ratepayers band together and say they're not going to pay our rates, clearly we'd have significant concerns at that point. in terms of the ongoing provision of those day-to-day core services, the reputational risk doesn't materially affect our ability to deliver those.
Sorry, just a comment if I may. I think that definition of reputational risk is exceptionally narrow. I would broaden it out immediately to things like, what does the investment development community think of their interactions with council? How do people who want to invest in housing, whatever it is in our region, what's their experience of dealing with Nelson City Council? Are we seen as a good person to partner with? And often that's probably not where it needs to be. So, and that absolutely goes to core delivery of services for council. So if reputational risk is being assessed by comment boxes on social media, I think that's very narrow.
Thank you. I think the point is taken. I think these are useful discussions to have, and I go to my opening comments in my chair's report that we're establishing where where a lot of these reporting levels are, where we want them to be. I think with risk, it's understanding that any organisation faces a range of risks. There are those that are mission critical in that you cannot provide your service if they go wrong. Absolutely right that the officers focus very strongly on that, because we have to maintain water supplies, we have to maintain all of those key critical services that we do. But there is also a number of other risks that aren't necessarily just focused on that mission critical activity, but on the ability of the organisation to serve its ratepayers in a broader sense than you've got water, nothing else matters. So it is getting that balance right. And I think we've got the pendulum swinging a little bit at the moment. We just need to get it settled in the middle to get those points there. I'll take the Mayor first as a member of the committee, and then I'll come to Councillor Noonan, if you're okay with that, Gail.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I think I'm not sure that on reflection, the wording of the previous measure in terms of reputational risk actually was touching all the points that it should have, and I think that's something that maybe Arlene is something to look at. If I was thinking around, and this goes to communication and engagement, and I'm really going to focus on engagement, so it's almost like that if you were to undertake a 360 for assessment for Nelson City Council, who would you need to have in the room to have that conversation? Yes, you would have to have the investment community. Yes, you would have iwi. There'll be a range of interactions that this organisation has at different levels. And I think it's perhaps that broader perspective that would actually be quite useful in terms of critical reputation in the context of engagement and actually activity and what we're doing. So I think if we take the lens, of in terms of being a good employer. So I would look at Nelson City Council at the moment as say, I can see evidence of Nelson City Council's reputation as a good employer on the rise. I can see that. We see that data coming through the Chief Executive Employment Committee. So I think we just need to take that broader perspective. But look, the other thing I just wanted, if I could just, in terms of 5.4 in the report, this talks about 2 high-rated risks being around major disruption from events and links them back in the report around lifeline services. I just want to, possibly because I'm fairly immersed in emergency operations, and I will just let you know that we have extended the emergency for another week. So we remain in a state of emergency as Tasman does. Actually in that context of what I suspect is going to be almost a state of norm at some point. So as we, the effects of climate change become more evident, more regular, and at the moment we could say weather, but I have to say, what we're watching, and perhaps the frequency of disruption events caused around weather happening more often and with more severity, then I think it's the impact, the risk impact that has on the council as an organisation and its ability to function. So I would say what I'm thinking there maybe is we just need to start thinking about, is there an emerging risk for us as an organisation around how we actually keep business as usual operating at the same time as, at the moment, probably, you know, almost to the day, we go round again for another, you know, civil defence exercise that involves significant contribution of staff time. So I'm not sure it needs to be there yet, but just maybe some thinking about, is this an emerging risk that we need to start thinking about? And I would say that's a conversation that shouldn't be focused on Nelson City Council, but rather a broader local government question to say, okay, what does the future look like? And in terms of the support that we get from McDem and how we make that work, is this a risk that we're adequately managing? You know, just for perspective, at the moment we've had over 400 staff from other councils in New Zealand coming into the Emergency Operations Centre to support us. I'm saying roughly, it's somewhere around 400 and something. It might be 423 or 24 or something, but over 400 now. Without that, you know, those people coming at some point, and some of them have been and come back again, we'd really be struggling in this region. But the reality I know is that at some point, and they know that, they say yes to us because at some point they want us to say yes to them. So I think from an emerging risk point of view, we should be thinking about it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's right. Councillor Noonan, thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Interesting that the Mayor's just mentioned that, because now that we're in another week of emergency, I think we do need to consider the risks, because group manager that I report with has been away for several weeks, and Tim and I both work with him, so it does have an impact. It certainly has an impact, especially when you have a different person that you're reporting to each week and they're not familiar with the whole. So it does. It is something that we probably should discuss and talk about. Because you haven't got that continuity, so you haven't got the continuity of business, so it is a risk for that. So that wasn't what I put my hand up for though, but that's news that I've just heard. So yes, there is definitely a risk there. Just relating to the reputational damage, it's interesting because I think the decision was made because it was a low risk, and I can see that that has been the case the whole time. But I think, as far as organisational reputation, I think probably the organisational reputation is pretty good. It's the political reputation that's the X factor. And that part of council, because we're out on the ground and we hear the issues, we don't bring them all to the council. We don't share, you know, all the emails. I mean, the mayor probably gets more than anybody else, but we're often putting out fires, if you like. So there is always, like I think someone said that it takes a long time to build a good reputation, but it takes very little to ruin it. And once you've got it, you want to retain it. So I think that, I think there are two things going on here. I think there's an organisational reputation, which is probably low risk because it's got mechanisms to keep it that way, but you've also got the political one where we're putting out little fires all over the place, if you like, that might never hit the headlines, but you probably don't realise that. So just another thread to think about, I think, and consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Noonan. Councillor McGurk, you had your hand up.
Yeah, probably haven't really got too much to add. I've never really liked that term about reputation for council, because it tends to sort of have a feeling of a bit of self-interest about the way we look. And the term that I would probably prefer is, you know, trust and confidence that would be a better measure. And I suppose what I'm thinking about is there it's a broad term that can deal with, you know, our employment, our consultation, regulatory functions, but it's any action or activity that is likely to damage or destroy our relationship between council, whether that's council as the organisation or individuals of the organisation, even the councillors themselves, and sections of our community. So it tends to be a bit of a broad term. Is this something that it might be that, you know, that breach breach of confidence or a whatever, but I would prefer the term of trust and confidence. And basically, that's the speedo on your organisational dial. Is that, that's the one thing you need to keep an eye on. Is this likely to impact our trust and confidence, and all the other things flow from that, rather than just say our reputation, because to me that seems like a rather self-serving term.
Thank you. I think the sort of discussions of clarification around what it actually means are useful, and hopefully are to you, Arlene. Councillor Goldberg.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I was looking at page 47, and under infrastructure, it does actually moderate level impact on council reputation, likelihood likely, and risk level high. And I kind of get that because we're struggling with staff, and also the demand for the contractors out the industry, so I get that, but I don't know if it's actually the council reputation. I really do like Councillor McGurk's comment there. It's trust and confidence in us achieving our infrastructure goals. And I think that's important, because at the moment you head down that slippery slope, you then do struggle to get people to turn up here or employ staff or all that other stuff. I'm not saying a reputation damage isn't important, because that does bring you negative connotation, and you do get people joining in that whole let's fill our staff time with complaints. But I do think it's I do kind of like that trust and confidence idea.
Thank you, Councillor Dobbin. Councillor Skinner.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to echo, not repeat, but yeah, I've struggled with that reputational thing, because the people out there you may think are our customers, but are actually our bosses, and we're providing a service, and it's a two-way thing, a confidence in our performing our services. So that's I very much like that terminology. Reputational means correct as in a business, and we are a business, but we're also offering a service to our bosses, as you could say. So spot on there. What was the other point? I was talking about our performance. Just good positive. I realise we're going for a period of state of emergency, etc., and our resources are being drawn. But I highly commend the staff. So even though there's been some changes happening and staff been hard working out over the bay, as you could say, I still have great confidence in staff, and I've been very impressed. And often, even though it may not be the staff member management we've been dealing with directly, there's enough good conversation at all levels as chairs that they pick up the line very well and very easily. So maybe it's just from my perspective, from my interactions, I've been very impressed, but also it's an opportunity and a signal that us as chairs and councillors need to step up our game as well, which I think we have, and realise there's going to be some gaps happening, and I think we are very understandable if there's gaps in reports. I'm not looking poorly on that, and I don't think the public will look poorly on that. The public, so don't be worried about reputational confidence, or they have confidence in us, and if there's any gaps in reporting or stuff that's being delayed, I'm pretty sure the public empathise and sympathise, but just really a hands up to the staff and to the fellow councillors.
Thank you for that, Councillor Skinner. I'm sure that's appreciated. Are there any other, Councillor Rutledge?
Just the two areas that we haven't assessed yet are two of our focus areas for our long-term plan. So I'm just wondering why those two haven't been able to progress in 6 months, and when we're going to expect to see those, because we did make those two of our 4 key priorities.
Who would be the best to respond? Would that be you, Ms Harrison, or Ms Aklak?
So through the chair, you will remember that through the LTP there wasn't a lot of detail around what lifting council performance means, for example, and so part of what we've done with changing the business improvement team is to try and focus on a work program that we believe will actually lift council performance. But no, that's quite a broad statement, and I think that all that was put in the LTP was really around refurbishment and something else, I can't remember, more staff, I think. So yeah, there is a bit of work to be done there. The other area that hasn't been defined...
Sorry, if I just could, I would have thought the measures you'd go to would be on delivering what we say we're going to deliver, response times around resource consent, like all of those measures of organisational health, and that those would be the ones you'd go to for organisation performance, wouldn't you? How we're viewed as an employer. And there seems to be a lot of things that one could
Well, we've been
measure.
measuring those things all the way along through the chair. We're talking about making a shift in lifting council performance from what we've been doing now.
Sure,
I mean,
so
we've
if you
been
measure-
delivering on our resource consent timeframes, building consent timeframes.
So if we're measuring all those things, then how come we can't see if there's well, here we are, here's where we want to be, and how's progress? And are we achieving that or not? Is that not? I don't know.
Can I suggest that the logical thing to do now would be to get an idea of what we will be measuring in those areas and have a discussion then whether we see that those are, rather than speculating at this point in time what they might be. I think the point raised that they are we're outstanding at the moment, we're waiting for them, they're being addressed. I think when we get them, let's have a look at them and see then whether they satisfy the expectations around those being meaningful performance measures. So when those come to us, we'll have a look at them.
And CBD development, Mr. Chair?
Sorry?
CBD development? The CBD development council priority area, again, we haven't not been assessed yet.
Again, I would put that in that same category because the work is being done at the moment, to my understanding, on that. Thank you. Any other comments on the quarterly risk report? Questions relating to that? If not, would somebody move that the quarterly risk report be received? Thank you, Councillor Goldberg. Thank you, Mr. Murray. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We move to the health and safety report and welcome Mr. Hughes to the table. Updates, highlights before we open for questions.
Yes, through the chair, I guess updates outside this reporting period, but the significant one was the two assaults on the EIL officers in January. It was quite concerning incidents. It was that those occurred. I believe the members of the committee have been updated on that though, but that's just not in this report because it was prior to since the reporting period. And there was one that I'll probably mention before I get asked about it. On the weekend there was an incident at Stoke Green Meadows where a customer at the cafe tripped when leaving the cafe, and we're currently investigating that incident.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. So open it up for questions. Health and Safety Quarterly Performance Report, page 59 onwards. Any questions, Mr. Hughes? Madam Mayor?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Malcolm, just a query, and I apologise because I missed the last Audit Risk Committee meeting, I think, so you may have already covered this. But I'm just interested in the change that's been made last year to the access to the customer services area off Halifax Street. That entry is now closed off. Is that for health and safety reasons?
Through the chair, Madam Mayor, you're talking about the door outside the planning office in the corridor in between from the customer service.
Talking about the public entrance off Halifax Street where the ramp is, and there's now a chain across that.
Oh, sorry, yeah, Halifax Street, sorry, yep. Yeah, I can answer that one. That was it was to do with issues with securing it quickly, yeah, in the event of these security incidents. The lockdown process we had didn't lock that door instantly as it did with all the others, and so that was a way around that. We checked with building around fire egress, and part of the procedure is to open it if it's needed, and that's acceptable.
Is there a way of addressing it other than having a chain across it, given that's, it's from the public face of your building, to have one? I just wonder if the door system could actually be sorted out so the door system actually does what it needs to do without having to have a chain over it. just if there's an incident?
Through the chair, I'll ask property to look at other options for that door and what we can do. I expect there will be considerable cost in changing the way the door works, though.
Thank you. Councillor Rutledge.
Just maybe a comment from Chief Executive about, we're all very aware the huge hours that some of the staff are putting in around this emergency management response and what steps are being put in place to manage staff health and wellbeing this time.
Thank you, Councillor Rutledge.
So it is something that worries me a lot, actually, is it's the number of staff, and they're working up until now. I think this week they've changed away from it, but they have been working 12-hour shifts, and particularly the 12-hour shift at night is absolutely exhausting because we give people the day off before it, but of course they can't sleep. Then they work 12 hours, and then they still struggle to sleep the next day, and then they either go back to a night shift or come back to work and very tired. So obviously we give all our staff who work their time off in lieu, but what we're also doing is for every 3 days they work in the EOC under that sort of pressure, we give them another day off of special leave, and we're expecting that they'll take that within the next 3 months. We'd like them to take it straight away, but sometimes if somebody's worked a weekend and lost time with their children, probably the next time, best chance for them to get that back is school holidays or something like that. So we don't want to take that option away as well. But we are mindful that we've got a lot of very tired staff. Sometimes it isn't showing because the adrenaline of the challenge is getting them through it. But we suspect that once they start coming back into their day jobs, they're going to find it pretty tough. And some of them are going to be well behind on their day jobs and under pressure as well. And we just have to be supportive and sympathetic about that. But it is something that we were discussing at the senior leadership team in terms of how we provide that support.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. Madam Mayor, you look as though you're about to...
I was, and I might just, picking up on that discussion, really just reinforce at the governance table that in these situations, every little bit of extra work is just adds to that burden. So from a governance perspective, really focusing on what is essential right now, what really has to be done right now. If it isn't mission critical, if it is something that really could wait till next month, then please make it wait, because this is, it is absolutely exhausting. So when I'm looking at what's going on, for those of you who came out to the EOC the other day, you can see how hard people are working. They're working in quite tight circumstances, and it's very, very intensive. So look, I just encourage you, all of us, if we can, keep those emails to a minimum. As we've discussed, if there are meetings that aren't absolutely critical right now, with catch-up meetings with officers or whatever, can we just get those cancelled, please, to free up time?
The other thing, of course, is we're running short-staffed here, so we've got some staff who aren't having the glamour of working in the AOC, who are just working, working more, covering for someone else's role and still trying to do their own job as well. So that's also putting pressure on the organisation. And look, Tasman District Council are very grateful for what we're doing, but it's simply part of the fact of being part of the regional team. We know that they do the same thing for us. We just hope they never have to pay us back.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. Any other question? Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just in light of the information in sections 5.2.2 and 5.2.3, when I relate that to the risk chart on page 71. Customer aggression. The fact that 2 people have been physically assaulted, that the police are involved, it seems to me that that assessment of only unlikely to happen it's been more than unlikely it's actually happened 3 times virtually, with the also with the assault on the windows of the customer service centre with a baseball bat. Is it, you happy with it as having it rated as unlikely?
Through the chair, the January incidents won't have been reflected in that risk assessment. The one with the baseball bat is included in there, and it was considering the controls. The fact that we had actually locked the customer service centre down before he arrived showed that our controls are working, so we're keeping that risk as low as we can in the circumstances. Around the assaults on the officers, they are a contractor that works very closely with council. However, I've already sat down with the manager of EIL and we've discussed options. They're looking at different protections and things they can do now to step up the controls they have and the protections they have for the officers, and so they'll be doing some things to make things better there as well. But your observation is correct though, that we need to look at, has that risk moved? It may have moved up when we come to do the next report.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Murray.
Thank you for your report again, Mr. Hughes. Just having a look at 5.4 due diligence activities, and I suppose this section could probably be more adequately titled how the governance body discharges its obligations towards health and safety. I'm just looking at that and going, well, Councillor Walker, thank you, has gone and done a worksite observation. I've done some in the forestry. There's been a few others that have done the odd bits and pieces here and there. But I sort of look at that and go, are we discharging our obligation under health and safety at this table? Because what it appears to be is a relatively random type approach to it at the moment. And do we need to, in terms of our health and safety work here, be a little bit more formal about engagement with governance and looking through and doing that due diligence of the system? And then I suppose that follows into a question around how can we make that happen? Or how can you make that happen more specifically? Through the chair, so I guess to answer the first part of the question, yeah, more would be better, but it seems that we've been having this discussion for some time, and perhaps the approach that we're taking, isn't working because it's not the right approach, and we could look at alternatives. And the forestry example is a good one, where we actually engage a consultant to monitor the forestry, and the committee member went with that consultant to look at the forest in this case, and it could be where we use that, or we use other agencies to provide some of this due diligence, or that perhaps the councillors have more involvement with seeing what's coming out of the senior leadership safe work observations, rather than trying to do the visits themselves, that tend to not focus that much on health and safety a lot of times anyway. Does that answer your question, Mr. Murray? Yes, but I suppose what I'm throwing on the table is perhaps a more structured approach towards this due diligence, and a more formal requirement to turn up and do these, and then that getting driven through the program itself, as opposed to me deciding, oh, well, I might go out and do one day sort of thing, if you know what I mean. So as opposed to, well, I'm just suggesting that might not be the right approach at all, but it just seems to me that this whole piece isn't really being delivered to at the level it needs to be delivered to, and that's around this table. It's actually not with management. It seems to me that management have all the systems and processes and procedures in here, and it's going very, very well from that end, an organisational end. It's just we need to up our game around this, is my perception, and how can you help us do that? Or I could be completely wrong. I'm happy for people to say, don't worry about that, Mr. Murray, just let it lie.
Well, before we put you on the spot for that and give you some time to think, Mr. Hughes, perhaps see if there's any other comments from anybody else, and I've got a comment, but I'll go to the mayor first.
Thank you, John. Yes, I did read this and had a guilty conscience, I have to say, going, I'm well behind in my number for the year. I just perhaps put an idea on the table that we actually do schedule these, that certainly in terms of my diary, everything basically has to be booked in, or there just isn't. They're not the sort of things I can find 2 or 3 hours in a week usually to be able to just make myself available. I wonder whether we should be using, perhaps looking at one of our workshop days, seeing if we've got, making this a priority and actually getting ourselves out to do these visits. Certainly from my perspective, I would welcome something getting booked in, but it needs to get booked in, and it usually takes a good, couple of months to find a gap.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Dahlberg, followed by Councillor Noonan.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm kind of thinking one of those things, if you program in like a bit like the asset management plan, everyone's a bit like the fire alarm, isn't it? We all get prepared to run outside. I do like the idea of the ad hoc. When someone's going, we tag on, or you want to go and check out the water reserve or whatever, the Maitai Dam, you go along and ask questions. I kind of like some sort of combination of that. I appreciate if that's what you're trying to find, what is actually happening there. You need to have some element of irregularity, I suppose.
Thank you, Councillor Dahlberg. Councillor Noonan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, my view is probably that I would like it to be applicable to the work that's happening, not just sort of think, oh, we'd better do one, what is it? Where are we going to go, what are we going to choose? Because I'm sure there are things that are going on that we're not aware of. So it's a matter of being made aware of the opportunities, and those that are interested in that particular area would go. I don't think there's any prescribed number of times that we have to do this, is there? 4. We're going 4. We've got hand signals now. 4 a year.
Through the chair, I know that for SLT it's 1 per quarter. I think it's less for councillors, whether it's 1 every 6 months or 1 per year. I'm not sure. It is in the governance charter, but I don't have that with me.
It might be a good place to start. Maybe we should be reminded of our obligation to start with, and then be made aware of some opportunities when maybe the staff are going out to do something that a couple of us might tag along at it, because we've all got different diary times, so it's not like you can just take a half a day and you'll never get everybody. But I think if we were aware that there is an inspection the staff might be going to do one, then we could go as well, and it would probably be a lot more beneficial for us listening to the questions that the staff ask of the people on site as well. I think we'd learn more. That's my view.
Thank you, Councillor Noonan. The comment I was going to make was closely associated, in fact, with yours, and that was the point about being relevant to the person involved rather than relatively random, and whether there was some solution that fitted around that. And one of the questions that rose for me in that is whether either at the respective committee meetings or the preliminary meeting between the chair and the group manager, whether health and safety comes up, whether it should be a topic, not necessarily for deep reporting that comes here, but purely in terms of raising a topic, become aware of what some of the opportunities might be in those discussions to be able to go and undertake some of those due diligence type things taking place, coming out of those direct interactions relevant to each individual.
So I was just thinking when you were saying that when the fire occurred over near Founders, I actually hopped in the car and went down to observe how the staff undertook what they needed to do at the time. I just thought, well, when the opportunity arises, if it's safe to do so, then it's a good thing to do. And I did spend probably an hour and a half down there observing the process of removing people and making sure everybody was safe and all that. So, I mean, don't really want to put that in your thing. But, I mean, that's just something that arose at the time. I took the opportunity and I was very interested to see. And they were fantastic, I have to say. They did a very good job of managing what was potentially could have been a dangerous situation.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Hughes? Any other comments on that? Take that back as some thought, perhaps, Mr. Hughes, as to what might be a better way of building that up. If there's no further questions, would somebody move that the Health and Safety Quarterly Performance Report be received? Thank you, Councillor Barker. Thank you, Councillor Dahlberg. Any further discussion? Not all those in favour, please say aye. 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 Against? Carried. Thanks, Malcolm. Internal Audit Quarterly Progress Report. Welcome, Lynn. And we're now on page 75. Updates, corrections, any change to the report before we open it for questions?
Yes, I'd like to just start by tabling 2 corrections on page 77 of the first report, on the quarterly progress report. So at the top section of the report that shows the 2 activities that have been audited, there's a findings ratings column, and what has occurred there is that the ratings have been inverted between those 2 audits. So just to make note of that. So what I'm indicating there is that the top column, which has 1 high and 5 medium, should in fact be related to the property and facilities maintenance, and in reverse the other way. The second correction is right at the bottom of that page 77, and it's under the work proposed for the integration of contract management and accounting information systems, and on the first line under the work proposed, it should read integrate magic contract management module, not risk management module. And that's all. I'll take questions in relation to the report.
Page, one while people are getting their thoughts together, page 78. Just looking at the last item there, the internal, project management one, not started under the progress. I just wondered what the level of priority is given the sort of high profile, high focus of project management in the organisation at the moment. I wondered what the plan was to commence that process.
Right, so yes, I should have updated on that. We're expecting, it's a literature review only at this stage for the work that's involved in that work program, and that's expected to be done by the end of the financial year.
Yep. Councillor Rutledge.
Thank you. The findings on the contractor management things are probably, unfortunately, no surprise to anyone. But I guess keen for perhaps comments from the Chief Executive about what we're doing to sort that out, noting 3.5 on page 80 seems to refer to that, and I'm just wondering if we can indeed have updates on how those things are going.
Can you clarify the area you're referring to, please, mate?
Certainly. So the findings from the audits, external contractor performance and property and facilities maintenance on page 77, and then if I'm reading it right, the note on page 80 in 3.5 that starts work to reduce the unacceptable risks refers to a meeting on the 30th of January of the SLT, and then the subcommittee, I guess this will be updated today, so just...
Thank you.
If I can address that through the chair, we're going to talk about that a bit more in the next report, and there has been some work that is in progress, and perhaps the manager of business improvement can talk to that.
Through the chair, I can provide a brief update on the discussion that's noted in the document with regards to senior leadership team on the 30th of January, and I can also advise you that Chief Executive was unable to be there that day, so may not be able to answer any detailed questions, but is aware of the plans. It was an internal management discussion to talk about how we shape up the programme of business improvement and lifting council performance. It was focused largely on the 3 areas that are noted in the audit plan under business improvement, so contract management, contractor performance management, asset management and project management, and the discussion was largely to talk about the approach that we want to take in terms of making those improvements. The approach, if it's appropriate to talk about it here, will be a stepped approach, and we'll be checking in at each end of step with a gateway on what have we done so far, how do we demonstrate the benefits and what the gains have been in terms of business improvement and lifting our performance, and at that point there'll be a management decision about how much further do we want to go, how much more benefits and gains do we need to make, so there'll be those checkpoints in place. And the other part of the discussion was about for my area of work, how do I shape that in terms of making space in this organisation for those business changes to happen?
Thank you. So, when does that? So this has now been flagged up at a governance level. These are some high risk areas for us. So, how does that flow through to the governance table, and how do we get updated on that work?
Through the chair, so you'll be updated on it through this internal audit report. Presumably, we're not required to update it, as far as an internal audit process is concerned, but presumably that is where you wanted it to be reported.
Thank you. I think that is the appropriate place. It's where it's been raised here, in terms of and the fact that we'll be updated at the meeting. So I think it's useful to have that update come through in that. Did you want to say something further on that?
Yes, that would explain why I was struggling to remember the meeting. But now, having got the agenda open again, I certainly found the recommendations in that review very much in line with my own thinking after being here for a year, and you'll have heard me talking about we need to simplify our contract management systems, make them more fit for purpose, and strengthen our activity management planning, and particularly our condition assessments and facilities management. But in some of those areas, this won't be a quick fix. The first thing you need is data, and getting the data can be slow and expensive and time consuming. But this is an area that we had already started to put resources into. This is why Arlene's team is now called the Business Improvement Team, is because of some of the changes we're trying to drive in a consistent fashion across the organisation. And I should also say that the strategy team are also heavily involved with the asset management improvements as well, and trying to get a more consistent standard across the organisation.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, and forgive me if I'm overlapping on page 77, talking about the property and facilities maintenance contracts, and that was just highlighted a few things there. Any more commentary on that? The second one down, regards to provide an assessment with adequate oversight and controls that exist to ensure that services provided across council properties and facilities are pre-authorised and well managed. And it's just noted that there's some inconsistencies in the facilities management processes, increasing the likelihood that council is not receiving value for money in its activities.
Yes, I can add to that through the chair. I think there's been some instances of unclear responsibilities, and so obviously inefficiencies there. There's work that gets duplicated, and an example of that would be through the parks and facilities and the properties teams, where there's a building that's on a park. There's you know, a little bit of uncertainty about who's responsible for that. The developing of the annual maintenance plans and the monitoring of that, there's inconsistency throughout the organisation. So, and we need to get better at understanding our unplanned work and having that more visible and understanding and getting the contractors to report on that. There's a whole bunch of things. There's some examples of them. Is that useful?
Thank you, that's very helpful. And just in that table, it's got the findings and ratings got high 3 and medium 1. Can you explain how what exactly that's meaning?
Through the chair, that's the correction that I made right at the beginning. So in fact, it should be 1 high and 5 medium. So the two have been inverted between those two audits.
Okay.
So the 1 high related to the disconnect between the asset management system and the financial system, so that we may not be actually recording all our costs on our assets fully. Having said that, the majority of the costs do go through there, because the majority of the maintenance work that's done is done by NALMAC, and we do record that against the assets.
Okay, thank you. That gives me a starting point. Very good.
Thank you. Any other questions on the quarterly progress report? Councillor Walker.
Thank you. I wonder if the CEO can just confirm page 83, the top line there, is that a result for, I'm just thinking of the...
Can I just say that's in the next report? Can we finish with this report first?
I don't.
If there's nothing further on the quarterly progress report. Would somebody move that be received? Thank you, Councillor Barker. Seconded by Madam Mayor, thank you. All those any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We now move to the summary of new or outstanding issues. Any updates on this, Ms. Anderson, before I get Councillor Walker's question?
Through the Chair, in relation to business continuity planning on page 81, the SLT have agreed the analysis and the proposed actions from the exercise that were done, and the extra bit to add is that the correction or the corrective actions that are going to be taken will be reported back to the progress on those, and what's been done will be reported back to SLT by the 30th of June. In terms of page 82, the very last one, the control environment in relation to legal risk. Since this report was written, the legal advisor is now reviewing decision-making reports where it's been identified by the author or by a group manager that there may be some legal risk involved, to confirm that we've got that covered correctly. So that that will reduce that risk quite substantially. In relation to all of the findings and risks to do with contracts and contractor performance management, we really are focusing initially on that area in terms of business improvement. We're looking at ways that we can automate certain reminders and just make it easier for staff to be able to do that, and for us to be able to report on what is being done. So there is a lot of attention being given to that area. The results of all of those most recent audits pretty much have the same theme. making sure that we have a central contracts register, making sure that we're managing our performance better, and making sure that we've got the staff that can do that work adequately, and where we can, automating it as much as possible.
Thank you, Ms Anderson. I'll take Councillor Dahlberg and then followed by Councillor Walker. Councillor Dahlberg as a member of the committee. So, Councillor Dahlberg.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Look, I just noticed on page 81, and we've got the water contamination prevention. Look, I'm just conscious that we've had fires and we've got people who feel like wanting to start them. Water contamination now, we just said today we're going to make a lot of media around that and our challenge on that area. And I see we've got a dam emergency action plan and contamination plan. Have we given some consideration what could happen in the next couple of months as water gets more attention?
Who's best to respond to that? Probably the Chief Executive.
I imagine they might cover that in the water contamination report here on page 81 due early next year. Or early this year.
I don't think that that risk to us of water contamination is more or less changed by drought conditions. It's the type of thing that we take seriously all the time. I don't know, there's very much more I can add at the moment, I'm sorry.
I pick up that it's great we're doing contamination reporting, because that is important, and I get the fact we're doing testing, I get that. I'm just conscious the fact now we're making more attention in the media about water and the struggles. Well, that would be there's some person out there, dare I say, attention seeking or whatever, that could give us another challenge. Have we considered, I don't know, more security, whatever it is?
No, at this stage, no, we haven't considered more security up there. In terms of our water supply, I suspect if there's more security, it's probably going to be, if it doesn't rain, that fire danger will see us starting to close the upper end of valleys, and I mean already I think some of the tracks in that area are closed because of the extreme fire danger, so we have probably already taken some of the steps.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Thank you, Councillor Dahlberg. I'll take Councillor Barker and then Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I'm referring to page 81, in particular the proposed exercise for the Maitai Dam. I know anything is possible. However unlikely, things can happen. But I am also cognizant of that, I think it was twice upgraded in the planning and the construction of the Maitai Dam. It was built virtually to withstand any known earthquake at that time, that as I recall it. So I'm just, is it a bit of overkill with having this exercise that dam's going to fail? I don't think that dam will fail. What could happen is that there could be an earthquake and there could be a landslip into the lake which could overtop the dam, and that sort of thing, as I see, as a risk. But I would have thought that our engineers would have checked very carefully on the specifications that dam was built to, and would have reassessed. Is there a risk now that wasn't foreseen when it was built? We don't want to have people fearful of the things that could happen when they were designed not to happen.
So I don't think the seismic risk will have changed from the very conservative reviews that were done. I think that the dam was also designed to withstand the maximum probable flood, and I know those things are reviewed every 5 years. That the consultants, every year the consultants who designed the dam come down, and once every 5 years external consultants review their reviews. And that's the time when those sorts of things can be triggered. And I know that's why we have done reviews of the seismic analysis and the maximum probable flood. And I suspect with climate change, we may have to revisit maximum probable flood again sometime in the future, and may have to adjust the size of our spillways. But no, that dam was incredibly conservatively designed. But it still does give peace of mind to the people in the valley to know that there is a procedure, that there's a telephone tree if something does happen, to give people warning to get out.
I don't want them to be unnecessarily fearful.
Oh no, look, this is a desktop exercise just to make sure that we have the systems in place and people know where to find them. It's a reassurance exercise. It's certainly not a lack of confidence in that dam at all.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Councillor Walker, thank you for your patience.
Thank you. The Downer situation, I've tagged 5 places in this quarterly report where I believe that it's impacted the Downer situation. And I notice on page 83 that we've got a new activity there of monitoring management of contractor performance. Is that the sort of thing that would have given a bit of prior warning to the situation that we face with Downer?
To be honest, our contract management is best in our infrastructure areas. And I would suspect that, I mean, I haven't asked Margaret particularly, but I suspect that our staff were suspicious that Downers were losing money. Usually you can tell by their response to service requests. No, this is more to make sure, in my view, to make sure that right across the organisation we have a more consistent standard. But no, I would think our infrastructure areas, in terms of contract management and contract monitoring, are better than most of the rest of the organisation. So I think it's probably trying to get the rest up to that level. And that's something that I've talked about as well, is in terms of extra staff that we need. It's in that asset management and contract management areas, getting in people who are specifically skilled in those roles.
Thank you. Any further questions of Madam Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to come back to this issue around contract management. Obviously, we saw that from the internal audit in the previous report, and now we're seeing the response here. So I just want to kind of get my head around what it is we are looking at. So I hear that the infrastructure area is probably a little bit more advanced than other parts of council, but I'm reading this going, was this focused on infrastructure, or was it really looking at a broad range of contracts across the organisation? Because I see on impact it talks about impact being without the ability to find contracts or a reliable contracts register for infrastructure contracts. It's difficult, and so I'm just not quite clear. And then I see reference to NZS 3910, which is infrastructure type of contract.
Yes, through the chair. We did focus on higher risk contracts when we gave the list of contracts to look at, but I think it's fair to say that across the board it's reasonably indicative of where we don't have good systems that are consistent across the organisation. Obviously we'd need to have slightly different ones in infrastructure than we would in other areas, but fundamentally we should be operating in the same way when we sign a contract.
Okay, so Lynn, can I just tease out? So when I look at this, because I've listened to Pat's response and I'm looking at what's here and listening to you as well. So when you said, so when you go and do this audit and you're talking about the higher risk ones, are the majority of these the ones, you know, when I go back to the previous report and then look at this, were the majority of the infrastructure contracts, or have you done a sweep across different parts of council?
Through the chair. So can I just talk about the findings, for example? So it talks about the fact that because there isn't a central contracts register, it's very, very hard to know what contracts we have. So that is across the whole organisation. We get a feeling because we, and this is the auditor, I didn't do these audits, they were done by an external audit, that there are areas where we're not particularly, we don't have the systems there, they're not there for anyone. If they're not there for infrastructure and the high risk contracts, they're definitely not there for the lower risk ones. So what we have found across council is that there are varying levels of expertise. So it does need to be an across the council solution, but in answer to your real question was, yes, it was primarily on, well, the second one was primarily on maintenance, so it's necessarily the buildings and parks, and the first one was looking a lot at infrastructure projects.
All right, so just to help me with this a little bit, because I have to say, I think we've been tracking this for a while now, and so you've flagged to us before that we've said, look, we've got some concerns about our systems around contracts, and Peter has as well. He's come in and said, no, I can see there's something here. So just as this might be getting in the weeds, but who can enter into a contract on behalf? You know, there must be some sort of level in the organisation where can anybody sign a contract? I mean, surely not every employee in this organisation can enter into a contract on behalf of Nelson City Council. There must be some sort of systems, please, are there?
Through the chair, yes, of course there is. The delegations register is a very good starting point. So yes, we have a delegations register, and anyone who has the delegation for that particular level of expenditure is able to sign a contract. It always gets reviewed, I believe, by the manager one up. I think. I could be wrong about that, actually.
So,
somebody correct?
So sorry, I just have to ask these questions because this is kind of stuff I just want to get in my head, because what I'm going away with, so I tell you what I'm going away with, the image of this, I read this and I go, right, no systems, contracts, this isn't looking good. What have we got in this organisation? Does that mean that I, at level 3 manager or 4 manager, have delegation to enter into a contract, I have it on my desk, I sign it off, and then it goes in that big pile at the end of my desk or the bottom drawer? Is that what's going on? Does it not go in some sort of something that says, I've just signed a legal document with services and surely I've got to put that somewhere really important?
There are a lot of systems. I guess what this is, so would you like me to give you examples? So we start off.
Mr. Chair, do you mind? I just kind of, at this point I'm going, I've got a range of risks I'm thinking about at the moment, but I'd just like to kind of sort of visualise this, but I'd like to visualise it with some confidence that there is a system in place that is going to mean that I'm not going to read this again in a report. So that's the challenge.
Okay, so we've got a number of different policies. We've got procurement policy, which is the starting point, and so there needs to be a reason to procure, and that might come from the annual plan, it can come from all sorts of different places. So there has to be a very good reason. There may be a requirement to do a business case. So when you look at the procurement policy, there are a whole lot of requirements that must happen, and there are a whole lot of hoops which must be leapt through. We have standardised contracts now throughout the organisation which must be used. They must be saved in a certain way. The templates that they use can't be altered or should not be altered, and if any contract doesn't, or any obligation doesn't follow our policy, it needs to be approved at a high level, generally I think through SLT, Group Manager. We have a number of processes that do in fact make our contract management reasonably okay. The reality of these findings is that we don't have consistency of that. We're not all over it as much as we should be, and we're probably not always getting the best value for money. We're not going right to the very end and working out the cost of that contract, and we're not monitoring it as well as we should.
Therefore, to get it to where you'd come to say to us, I've done an audit on this and it's absolutely as I'd expect and want it to be, and I'm satisfied this is a robust system. What is happening to get us there, and how long is it going to take? Because I can see some things are on hold.
Right, through the chair. I can't tell you how long it's going to take because I think there's a substantial amount of work that needs to be done. I can tell you that right now we are working on that. We're looking at the way that data can be obtained, how we can get that data, how we can report on that data, how we can show we're making improvements and that kind of thing, but we actually are doing that right now.
Final question, which almost seems like the perverse of what I've just been asking, is are we sure that standardising everything is actually delivering the best service that we could? Because I noted that we had, earlier in the reports today, that there had been some delay around the festivals, the transfer of the into the festival system. And I'm conscious, just from discussions that I've had, that that particular contract took quite a bit of working through and took quite a bit of time. And I'm just wondering, is essentially, if I'm wanting to sign a contract for the construction of a pump station, whether that contract is the appropriate contract for entering into a contract for arts festival services?
Through the chair, we've got a substantial number of different contract templates for every purpose. There are many of them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Rutledge, you had a question?
Yeah, it was just something I just picked up from what the officer said, that most of the audits, most of what was looked at was in the larger, the infrastructure space. And clearly the results aren't, you know, a perfect bill of health. And then the Chief Executive said that the infrastructure is the area that we're doing the best in, and the ambitions to get everything to that level. Are we setting the bar high enough here? If most of what was looked at was that infrastructure and that didn't quite get there? Am I missing something here?
If I may answer that through the chair. I think when you look at the high rating, for example, for the first one, the monitoring and management of contractor performance, it's quite specific about what the high risk actually relates to. So what they're saying in that particular example is that we're not always looking at contract risk, for example. And so we need to make sure that we're doing that well and that we're doing that consistently. So in another example, there is, that might be that the skills level isn't as high. Now that can refer to infrastructure or it can refer to anyone else. It doesn't necessarily mean that everything that infrastructure is doing is not very good. I'm just saying that these risks actually apply to certain aspects of those particular, that contract management.
And I'm not saying infrastructure is where we need to be, but they're closer than others. But they do handle a lot of money, so they will be a focus as well. But yeah, there are other areas of the council where our contract monitoring, just isn't as good as what they are doing. They do it more. They have better systems. They're still not where we need to be, but they're closer. But this is an issue across the organisation. Yes.
So a question from me, just following on from that. I mean, I think it's really good to have these discussions, and I note that this is very much in front of SLT at the moment. The meeting of the 30th of January being sort of latest area or latest time that was discussed. Can we get some sense of the priority and the drive to conclusion of some of this work at the SLT level? Is this something that is just dealt with in a discussion on the 30th of January because it's interesting and not much is going to happen as a consequence, or is there now some element of energy behind getting some movement on this?
Through the chair, I can answer that. We're working on an outline program that takes us through some of our next steps, the first things that we want to do to try and achieve quickly and to make some improvements swiftly underway. There's potentially a significant amount of work, as Ms Anderson's already discussed, and there's an action on me to return to our senior leadership team with a more detailed work program in all of the areas where we're looking for improvement in our performance and across our business.
And of course, one of the challenges is, so Arlene will make changes to systems and then people have to get used to that change way of doing business, which will drop their efficiency for a while. And this is people that are already under pressure, so that we just have to be mindful that if I try and drive too much change from the top down, all I'll do is just create resistance and wear people out. So there is a balancing act. We have to keep business as usual running at the same time as we're trying to lift performance, and it's a constant juggle to achieve both.
Thank you for that, and I think it's something worth keeping that in mind, Chief Executive. I think obviously from our perspective, as people involved at the governance level, is having had these issues raised, there's a desire for reassurance that they're being attended to within the resources that are available within the time frame that is practicable for you to do it, and it's getting that reassurance that is the important thing.
Oh, absolutely. Look, I read those reports, and there's nothing in there that I disagree with. It's just, I think to myself, shit, how are we going to do all this? You know, there's a lot of work here. What's the first cab off the rank, and where will I get my best bangs for bucks? And that's why Arlene and Lynn are looking at that, and also ease of implementation. Yeah.
Thank you. That's useful. Madam Mayor.
I'm happy to move that we receive the report. And just in terms of time frame, and I went back to, yes, so here are our 4 key priorities in the long-term plan, and guess what? Number 4 is lifting council performance, and I really appreciate the way that, Arlene, the way you've done the reporting. It's actually fantastic to be able to see that against the priorities. And Pat, I'd just say to you, 5 weeks into the job, I asked you, said, right, I want this turned around, and you said you couldn't do it in 18 months. Well, we're now past a year, and you reckon you could do it in maybe 2.5, 3 years? I've remembered that conversation, so we'll see how we go.
On track. Thank you. So did I take it from that you moved that report be received, Madam Mayor? Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Dahlberg, thank you. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Arlene. Very useful. We'll move now to the letter from Audit New Zealand, page 85, which you've got in front of you. And presumably we'll direct any questions on this to Ms Harrison. Is there anything you want to say about it?
No updates.
So I just sort of comment that it's a good report to have received, I think, overall, in terms of an audit report for the organisation, but open it up for comments, questions. I think Mr Murray's leaning forward, so. Did you have a question, Mr Murray?
Happy to make a comment. I suppose it starts with, again, I'd just like to congratulate Ms Harrison and Ms Hughes on yet again another fantastic cycle for the council. The fact we've got an unmodified audit opinion speaks for itself in a lot of different ways. But the result of that and all of that work, and I must admit there's $148,000 worth of Audit New Zealand's time in this organisation, crawling through everything that we've done and looked at various aspects to come up with the list that they have come up with in terms of where we need to focus our attention is, I think, a real credit to us. We're never ever going to have this 100% perfect. In fact, I've never yet seen an audit letter come out from the auditor that says all's tickety-boo, full stop. They always find relative bits and pieces for us to look at, and for $148,000 I'd expect that. So when I looked through the letter, I was really looking for some really big red flags, which I went, whoa, hang on a minute. And I'm happy to say that from my point of view, I can't see any at that level anyway. Now, sure, there's a few process improvement type matters, around the consolidation. I think they make a pretty big matter about that, but having been involved in consolidations, it's a rather complex and tricky thing. So again, unsurprisingly, and if we can do it better, then great, that'd be good, but we got there in the end. So look, I think we should be, along with our rating come out, it talked about good financial performance and strong systems. I think this letter reflects that. And the areas that they've looked at where they specifically went into around legal compliance and rates and all that sort of stuff, they've all ticked it up, saying that's all good. So I think it's a great letter for the council to receive from the auditor. It comes from a position of they have crawled through the organisation and turned it upside down. So they're speaking with a degree of inside authority, and I'm very happy that we're able to move this report and then hand it back to management to say please work on the bits and pieces that they've asked for, as they are doing.
That management formalise an in-house company search at year end to ensure all interests are disclosed and that all related party transactions are reported. Is management planning on actioning that recommendation?
So through the chair, from memory, we will be doing it before the end of Q4 to try and sort of flush things out and give us enough time to be able to respond. But we're planning to implement that, but I suppose there's still that self-disclosure thing that we're relying on.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you. Just a bit of commentary and question on the bottom of page 89, and it goes over to page 90 in regards to the preparation process. And I know this is discussed in previous audits, that it is a time-consuming process and a manual process. And I think if I recall rightly from previous times, there was talk about improvements where we could work better with the audit office in regards to speeding up that process of information. I guess there's different programs involved. But on page 9, it talks about, we do however note that consistent with prior years, the audit of consolidation was time intensive due to relatively manual process. And they go on to say, we consider there to be significant benefits for both parties in working together to find a streamlined approach. So my question is there things they're saying that it could be streamlined? From our perspective, are there areas of improvement to streamline or processes of, might be a case of similar programs of software? It talks about that in here, we've been able to access, I think it's to do with payrolls, etc., and we've corrected those, but there are areas that says it's ongoing. So just really a bit of feedback. Is there something we can streamline it to save us cost and time rather than manually going through everything?
Ms Harrison?
We do actually have a system called Value Financials, which is a PricewaterhouseCoopers system that we use for consolidations and audit tracking of adjustments, etc. And I think it works reasonably well. The things that I want to focus on potentially streamlining are the fact that we have NRSBU, the landfill and civil defence all audited individually, and we're paying for that, and we don't actually believe we need to to do that. We do have a reasonably complex consolidation because we actually own a number of entities 100%, as well as a few kind of 50% shareholding. So it is relatively complex, but I think each year we're ticking things off and making improvements.
Just to follow up, and I don't claim to understand all the intricacies to complete this, but is there anything from us from governance we can do to support the streamlining from our CEO and financial officers? I see we are taking good steps according to the report, but is there anything we can do as governance to help that?
Potentially, yes, but I'll bring something to the, I mean, I would really like to not have to audit the landfill and the regional sewage, and that would have to go through a change in the MOU and the founding documents, so support with that would be good.
So thank you. So my request to the chair is that please come to us on anything that we can do to help that in regards to, we've got you saying separate entities, each doing their separate audit for one organisation.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Nikki, in just thinking about it, as you know, I'm trying to find, as we are, trying to find every bit of savings we can as we look at the annual plan. If you didn't have to do separate audits for civil defence, NRSBU and the regional landfill, what sort of savings could you achieve? Have you had a look at that?
They're not in our annual plan numbers anyway because they're sort of outside, you know, they're 50-50 joint. I think it's probably...
Oh, they're in closed accounts.
Yeah, they're not part of our audit fee, they're separate audit fees.
Okay.
There are definitely savings, and I think where I see the benefit is a saving in staff time because the materiality levels are so much lower, and yet actually once it's added into our numbers we almost don't see it. There will need to be a level of assurance given, because it's the joint committees and we're doing all the work, there will have to be some level of assurance. It's just not a full Audit New Zealand audit.
Okay.
I'll probably just get a local firm to do some level of assurance so that TDC know that we're, you know, managing the finances properly.
All right. Well,
but it's, you know, it could be 30,000.
30,000
It's still
useful.
money that we don't need to be spending.
Yes, it is. Okay, so should we advance that to the joint committee? How would we advance that?
I'll bring that forward. I just need final sign off from Audit New Zealand, and then I'll bring a paper forward.
Thank you.
But yeah, it's, for me, it's the benefit of staff time and.
Okay. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, it has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Would somebody propose move that we go into? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Barker. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Now go into public excluded.